welcome to everybody, and we'll continue to let people in. This is the JCC Resources Call for Professionals, and it's for professionals across the fields. So some of you may be arts and culture professionals, some of you may be Jewish educators, some of you are administrators. We welcome all. It's about making connections between your departments and really fortifying the kind of outreach that you do with your community. So thrilled that you're with us. I'm Randy Luderman. I'm Vice President of Development and Arts and Culture at JCC Association of North America. And joining me today is Isabel Marash, who is also from JCCA, and my delightful better half, Program Manager, Development and Arts and Culture as well. About to be someone else's delightful better half, I might add. And our wonderful artist educator, Hanan Harchol, who Isabel's going to introduce in a second. And I'm so thrilled that you're here with us, Hanan. So it's just exciting when we get to bring this level of skill and engagement to the field. So welcome.
Thank you.
As Isabel sort of quickly helped us move forward, the session's being recorded. We know some of you don't want to be recorded, in which case you can turn off your camera. We're encouraging as many people who are comfortable enough to do so to leave your cameras on, so we really can feel as much as possible that we're together. And we'll continue to move forward with that. Part of what JFest is for us, and part of the reason for this call, is to address the ongoing work that everybody's doing, integrating the digital delivery of arts and culture content, along with so much outreach and creative in-person programming that you're all beginning to do in various stages, and then stopping and starting, right? We're in a series of connected events, evolving and continuing to change, and we just are trying to provide the widest scope for experience possible in your communities and support it with resources of excellence. And so that's really what JFest is about. We're really very invested in this idea that content is really only coming alive when you continue to engage locally in your communities. And so part of what this event is for is to really help you do that. This call is really for you. Part of our JFest pilot initiative, funded by our friends at the Covenant Foundation with support from the Pertzik Center and Fund for Arts and Culture. So right before our October JFest begins, our events begin for October, we're going to share some exciting resources with you and think together about the ways we can deepen our connections in our communities using these resources. Isabel, please say hello and welcome everybody.
Hello, it's so good to see familiar faces and also new faces. I feel very privileged to be introducing Hanan, who I've gotten to know a bit over these past few months. Hanan Harchol is a New York-based teacher, filmmaker, animator, artist, and classical guitarist, fun fact. So Hanan's animations have been broadcast on Channel 13 and at over 100 film festivals nationwide. His animations, drawings, and paintings were the subject of a solo cataloged museum exhibition at the Hebrew Union College Museum in New York, which subsequently traveled the country. And the animated series Jewish Food for Thought, which we will be taking a look at today, generously funded by the Covenant Foundation, teaches Jewish ethics through thought-provoking animated conversations between Harchol and his Israeli parents, and is used as an educational resource by countless schools and synagogues across the country. Hanan has also been invited to present his work at Jewish educational conferences across the US and the UK. So without further ado, I will let Hanan speak for his amazing work and share some of it with us today. And I will just say that I am looking forward to seeing this film again, probably now for the 10th time. So passing the mic to you, Hanan.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for coming. I want to first thank Randy and Isabel for inviting me and for thinking about this for your wonderful program. And secondly, I want to thank the Covenant Foundation, because the Covenant Foundation is the reason that these animations exist. I just want to very, very briefly talk about my Jewish journey because it relates to the animations very much. I was born in Israel in Kibbutz Kinneret. It's actually Kfutzat Kinneret, but I moved to the United States when I was 2.5. And I was raised always knowing that I'm Jewish, but it wasn't connected to anything, any kind of religious observance. It wasn't connected to any kind of text study. After my parents got divorced, I was 11. became what's known, I guess, as a twice a year Jew. We would go to a Seder at an observant home. And on Erev Yom Kippur, we would go to a service, which I didn't connect with in any way, but I connected with a Seder. At age 39, I participated in a program that was funded by the Covenant Foundation. And to make a long story short, I started reading Tanakh for the first time at age 39. And I started seeing that there's a lot of wisdom in here that could be useful for people who were Jewish, but it wasn't connected to anything, but still somehow the wisdom was lost. So the idea of the animations is to make the wisdom more accessible. The interesting part about the animations is that, first of all, they're all free. They're all based in YouTube. So you can embed them in your website for free without even requesting permission. You can just embed the websites, the animations in your website. And what's interesting is that they embedded my website, my animations in websites like Kikar HaShabbat in Israel, which is a Haredi website, but also 6 of the animations are embedded on URJ website, and another 7 are embedded in Aish. So it really is cross-denominational, and even websites that are not Jewish have used my animations for dating advice and various other things. But rest assured that in the animation that you're about to see, and in each of the animations, they're usually about 100 teachings taken directly from Jewish text sources, but then translated in a very accessible way in these animations. And don't let the word animation fool you. They're really meant for teens and adults, but maybe even more for adults, especially this one that you're going to see now has kind of heavy topics, but it's meant to be entertaining, but also very thought-provoking. Without further ado, I'm just going to show you one of the animations. Just heads up, it is a 13.5-minute animation. It goes by quick. The reason I want you to see the whole animation is to see that it really is structured like a story. Most of the animations are about 10 minutes long, and they're all free on my website. And I will put in the chat the link to the website, but it's basically hananharchol.com. But in case you forget hananharchol.com, if you just type into YouTube the words Jewish and forgiveness, my animation on forgiveness is the first animation, or you type in Jewish and gratitude, my animation on gratitude is the first thing that pops up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they're also all here. So let me just show the animation. And one thing that I'd love for you to do, if there's any line in the animation that makes you think, just resonates with you in some way, just jot that line down so we can use it for the discussion later. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. If there are any technical problems, you'll let me know. But here we go. By the way, this animation is entirely autobiographical.
I can't believe it. A Nobel Prize. Do you know that guy? We went to the university at the same time. But then I felt that research wasn't producing anything. So I stupidly left academia to work on gamma detectors. And now look, he lives on top of the Carmel in the expensive neighborhood. And he looks good. And he has a beautiful wife. And he speaks nicely. And he was already rich. But now he's getting a $1.5 million Nobel Prize. You still have your PhD, Daddy. I mean, you're still the only nuclear physicist I know. Nonsense. I'm at the end of my career. I'm practically finished. My life is done. 2 years ago, when I needed the heart surgery, you and your sister saved me, only to let me live a useless life. You're getting a little melodramatic here, Daddy. Look, have you thought about doing some volunteering? I see these volunteers. I can't work for free. I need to get paid, even if it's just a little bit. If people aren't willing to pay me, then I don't feel appreciated. When you were recovering from your heart surgery, I remember you said the only way you would be happy is if you could go back to Israeli dancing. And now you're dancing 3 times a week. I'm allowed to change my mind. The point is, soon I'm going to retire. And what do I have to show for it? Do you really need more? I mean, you have a pension. You live in a comfortable apartment, which you own. You can drive to a restaurant, have a delicious meal, including dessert, without worrying about the cost. To many people, that would be a luxury. And if I was in their shoes, I would feel even worse. Do you know the story about the rabbi and the goat? Which one? Here's the quick version. There once was a farmer who complained to his rabbi, "My house is too small. My wife and 3 daughters are all squished in one tiny room. What should we do?" So the rabbi says, "Take a goat from the yard, bring it into your house." So the farmer's like, "What, a goat?" But the rabbi insists and tells him to come back in a week. So a week goes by, the farmer comes back completely stressed out and says, "There's absolutely no way. We're so cramped. It's so tight. Rabbi, there must be a better solution." So the rabbi says, "I have the perfect solution, but you have to do exactly what I say." So the farmer agrees. The rabbi says, "Bring another goat into your house and come back in a week." So the farmer comes back, and this time he's even worse, completely exhausted, horrible, with huge bags under his eyes. And he tells the rabbi, I don't know what to do. The goats are eating the furniture. They smell. They keep us up all night. So the rabbi says, okay, now get rid of the goats and come back in a week. So the next week, the farmer has a huge smile on his face, looking relaxed, well-rested, super happy. He says, Rabbi, life is so good. Our house is so big. We have so much room. Thank you for making me so happy. Of course I know that story. That's a good story. But you missed the second part of the story, where the farmer walks by his neighbor's house and notices that it's twice as big with a swimming pool in front of it. Well, I think the point of the story is that there's one absolute sure way to have enough. By getting some goats? No. The way to not only have enough, but more than enough, is to be grateful for what you have. Well, obviously you should be grateful for what you have. Everybody knows that, Hanan. But being grateful doesn't change the reality that the farmer's house is small. The reality is that the farmer's house is what it is. But until the farmer was grateful, he didn't even really have the house he lived in. He was homeless. Hanan. Just because the farmer wanted more doesn't make him homeless. But Daddy, don't you see, by being stuck on what he wanted, he wasn't able to benefit from the house he already had. I would argue that being grateful is the only way to actually get any benefit out of life at all. And I'm not talking about being grateful like something you check off a list, like brushing your teeth. I'm talking about actually stopping and recognizing, actually seeing what you have. I see very clearly, Hanan, and anybody that lives in a tiny house is going to be miserable. What about your friend Galina? She lives in a tiny apartment. She's like barely able to pay her rent. Is she miserable, Galina? No, for some reason, she usually seems pretty happy. Why do you think that is? I don't know, because she plays with her granddaughter. She doesn't think about her problems, but she's obviously being naive. She doesn't realize how bad things are. She's blind. Well, you have 2 grandchildren. I don't know how to relate to them. I'm old. They can't understand me. I can't understand them. I missed my opportunity. Daddy, you're so focused on what you think you've lost and what you think you can't get that you're completely ignoring what's going on right now. Right now, I'm depressed. That's what's going on right now. Yeah, but you're depressed because you're regretting leaving academia, which is the past. And you're worrying that you won't ever be able to live on top of the Carmel, which is the future. But what about right now? Is there anything really wrong right now? Here you go again with that fancy schmancy philosophical mishigas. It's one of the many talents you have with which to impress the women. But you can't relate to my situation, Hanan. Let's see this for what it actually is. I'm never going to win the Nobel Prize, and I'm never going to be rich, and that's not going to change. What problem do you have that's not going to change? How about the fact that I've had eczema all my life? I've seen every specialist. There's nothing they can do. Yes, you have bad skin. It's terrible. We all know it. What's your point? When I was a teenager, you would sit across from me at breakfast, scanning my face, saying, I feel so bad for you with your skin. Who is going to want to be with you? You know, I was always afraid to ask girls out because I was so worried that they would be turned off by my skin. I was just trying to be sympathetic to your problem. But it made me feel terrible. You have bad skin. I wish there was something I could do. But you can't expect me to pretend that you don't have bad skin. Besides, you somehow managed to find a beautiful wife in the end. She doesn't even notice my skin. Well, then she's blind. Maybe all of these people that you think are blind are actually seeing something that you don't. I'm not going to become one of these phony people and pretend that your skin is good. Do you know how I met my lovely wife? Some kind of music thing. We met at a classical concert, and the music was so beautiful. And I told her why I love Mozart so much. And when the music was playing, and I spoke to her about Mozart, I was there in the moment, filled with so much love and appreciation. And that's what she saw, because that's what I saw, and that's who I was. And we were connected in timelessness. Oy, Hanan, do you want me to throw up? Believe me, I'm well aware of the fact that you know how to talk to women about art and music. So, a beautiful woman fell in love with you. Wow, you sure know how to make someone feel better. But Daddy, I didn't go to the concert to meet anybody. I was wearing an old t-shirt, checkered shorts, and sandals. I went because I genuinely love the music. But you still met your wife? But my skin was still bad. What's your point? My point is that if I had been miserable about the fact that I was born with bad skin, I would be stuck in the past. And if I'd been worried about what people would think of my bad skin, I'd be stuck in the future. Either way, I would have been preoccupied with the reality of my expectations instead of the reality of that very moment. What do you mean, reality of your expectations? The reality of my expectations is the past and the future as I imagine it. It's what I think life should have been, the way it all was supposed to have worked out, or it's what I feel entitled to have, or what I'm afraid I'll never get. Oh, now you know how I feel. Of course, I also get stuck in the reality of my expectations. But Daddy, that's not reality. That's in your head. That's all your ego. The reality is that life is what it is, and it's up to you to find a way to deal with it. But the first step is to get out of the future or the past and just be in the present moment. First of all, I have no idea what you just said. And secondly, how does this have anything to do with meeting your wife? Well, imagine if I had stayed depressed about being born with bad skin. First of all, I probably wouldn't have even gone to the concert. But even if I had, I would have been so preoccupied with my expectations that I wouldn't have been flexible enough to see what was actually presenting itself to me in the moment. The beautiful music, the lovely evening, the woman sitting next to me. To really get the most out of life, you have to be in the moment. You have to be present. And I can think of one absolute sure way to be in the present moment. By being grateful. I was appreciating the music, that's what I saw, and that's what she saw. That's easy for you to say, Hanan, but you were born with bad skin. You've had it all your life. But I used to be at the top of my career. My life was full of potential, and I can't get that back. You haven't lost anything significant in your life. I wasn't going to tell you this story, but now I think it might do some good. When we found out we were pregnant, I was so happy I actually started to sob. I wasn't allowed to tell anybody about the pregnancy for 3 months to be on the safe side, but I couldn't resist, so I started telling strangers on the subway, my wife is pregnant. Then we went for a sonogram and discovered that it was a blighted ovum. A what? A blighted ovum. The doctor explained that it was an empty sac, that the body reacted to it as a pregnancy, but that there was nothing in the sac and it was going to come out as a miscarriage. The doctor even offered a pill to get rid of the pregnancy so we wouldn't have to wait for it to come out on its own. How come I never heard about this? Because it would have just made you sad and angry, and because it was between me and my wife. So what did you do? We grieved. We grieved for 5 weeks over our loss. And then when nothing came out, we went in again, and the doctor realized she had made a mistake, and she said we had a beautiful, healthy baby. What? She miscalculated the date of conception, and the embryo was too small to see. And she based the blood work on the miscalculated date, so she thought it was a blighted ovum. That's terrible! It's criminal! What actions did you take? I was also angry at first. And if I would have stayed with that, I would have probably told you so we could be angry together and figure out how to get even. But then I remembered that we first thought we had a beautiful baby, and then that was taken away from us. We believed we had lost it, and then it was given back to us again. Daddy, I was so humbled by the experience because I realized how little is in our control. And I suddenly became filled with gratitude. What about the doctor? The doctor made a mistake. We switched doctors. The point is, our son was born. You have a son that loves you. That's a very good reason to be happy, Hanan. Daddy, you also have a son that loves you. But your son is a baby, and you're grown up. Hanan, you can't relate to my situation because you simply have so many things you get enjoyment from. But there are so few things I get enjoyment from, and those few things are relatively minor things. There's nothing that I can really appreciate these days, Hanan. Besides, of course, the things that I can't get. Are you sure about that, Daddy? I remember 2 years ago when you were sitting on the hospital floor with your back against the wall, huddled in a blanket because the only way you could sleep was with your back perfectly vertical because your heart was failing and your lungs were filling with fluid and it made you cough uncontrollably. I remember when all you kept saying was, I can't sleep, I keep coughing, if only I could stop coughing. I saw you suffering so much, and all I wanted was for you to be able to breathe. And when I went to bed that night, as I was scratching, I stopped for a moment to say thank you that I can breathe. Do you remember when you were not able to breathe? I do. Stop for a second and take a deep breath right now. Can you breathe? Yes. If there was anything good about that horrendous experience, it would be that by getting your breath back, you now have the chance to truly appreciate breathing in a way that most of us can't. That is, of course, if you choose to see it. Be grateful, Daddy. Express it. Feel it. Every day. It'll connect you. And I think it'll make you happier. When did you get to be so smart? I didn't invent this, Daddy. This is ancient wisdom. People have been talking about it for thousands of years. We just need to keep repeating it to each other. Speaking about repeating, tell me again what you said about Mozart. I thought it made you want to throw up. It's not for me, Hanan. It's for Galina. I'm going to invite her out to dinner. I'll join you. Now you're forgetting another ancient wisdom. 2 is company. 3 is a crowd. That's right. Fine. Wait till I tell Galina about the fancy Mozart schmancy beautiful of the timeless and the music and the beautiful schmancy.
So if I can just ask you to watch a little bit of the credits, because I didn't come up with this stuff.
While we're watching it, I'm grateful for everyone that supported you. I'm also just grateful that you're sharing these stories. I'm laughing on mute, so I'm not sure anyone could really hear me, but there's so much richness, and I know we'll have a continued conversation, but I'm just so thrilled that we all got to watch that together. Together apart, as they say.
And just to let you know, in all the other animations, my father is the teacher of the wisdom. But this is the one where you actually get to see what my father was really like, and I was trying to comfort him. But in all the other ones, my father is the teacher. And now we have 2 sons. So this was done a long time ago. This one. So I think that's it. There we go. So let me stop sharing the screen. Oh, let me just share just one other thing. Yeah, I'll stop sharing the screen, and I'll just show everybody that really quickly. Everything is on my website, hananharchol.com. And you just go to animation, and you'll find that each animation is there with a study guide. And this is one of the early animations. So this early animation, the one on gratitude, let me see here. It has a study guide that is only, when you click on this, you can watch the animation. It's in YouTube, and you can see the study guide. This study guide is only 2 pages, but the last animation that we did has a 15-page study guide. But I just want to show you that this has just kind of some of the texts used, from Brachot 58a, what does a good guest say? How much trouble my host has taken for me, how much meat he set before me, how much wine he set before me, how many cakes he set before me, and all the trouble he has taken was only for my sake. But what does a bad guest say? How much, after all, has my host put himself out? I've eaten 1 piece of bread. I've eaten 1 slice of meat. I've drunk 1 cup of wine. All the trouble my host has taken was only for the sake of his wife and children. So it's just kind of a different perspective on attitude. This idea about the present moment. You must make sure to set aside a time each day when you can reflect calmly on everything you're doing and the ways you are behaving, and ask if this is the right way to spend your days. Who is rich? Those who rejoice in their portion, of course, from Pirkei Avot. That's more commonly known. And this text here relates to kind of the idea of the present moment and timelessness and the idea of time. But as the animations went on, the study guides became richer and richer, and had more and more content. But I guess the question that I wanted to ask everyone here is, was there a line, was there something in the animation that resonated with you? You don't have to even know why. Was there something in there, some concept or something that someone said that resonated with you, that you wrote down or that you remember? Anybody?
I did. But, I'm happy to start us off.
Okay.
I wrote down, you saved me only to let me live a useless life.
Mm-hmm.
That resonated with me.
Why did that resonate with you?
I think that sometimes when we go through either a life-threatening moment or a tough moment or a moment where we feel we've been given another chance, in those moments, we make promises to whomever. We make promises to ourselves. We make promises to our families. We make promises to God, and to the earth. And we say, if only this, then that, if then, right? And then as life continues to take you on your journey, if you're lucky enough to move through whatever that was, you sort of relinquish that moment where you had this crystal focus on why you would take advantage and why there was almost an imperative to gratitude, which maybe was a bargain you made at a low moment, but really is, as this animation, I think, so beautifully shares, the name of the game, right? This idea that you take a pause and say, I am here. This is where I'm standing in it, and I'm here. And to define what it means to be useful is a ongoing challenge, I think, for many of us.
Yeah, and I think, Randy, you're describing this idea of kind of relative, the relativity of how we feel based upon what's happening to us in that moment, is really amazing. Before we go on to someone else's comment, I want to tell a quick anecdote. While I was studying for this animation with one of my teachers, Ma'oz, we were sitting in a cafe and talking about something deep in the Talmud, and it was some really important passage that we were discussing. And, we were very, very busy in conversation. And all of a sudden, the waiter comes by with Ma'oz's Coke. And Ma'oz just says, hold on one second. And I feel very kind of annoyed that we're being interrupted. And he takes his Coke and he holds his glass. He closes his eyes and he says to himself a bracha. And then he stops and he takes a sip of his Coke and tastes it and then puts the Coke down. And he wants to then continue talking. And I look over at my glass and I realize that I've already drank my Coke, but I don't remember what my Coke tasted like. And that was a huge lesson for me, because in the process of getting to where I thought I needed to be, I kind of missed my life along the way. I missed the journey. So since then, one of the things that I really try to remember every day is at least once a day for my two boys to hold their head and give them a big kiss and be as present in the moment as I can, taking in how excited and happy I am that they are there right now. And this idea of just being in that present moment, some people call it Buddhism or meditation or presence, but in Judaism, that's gratitude. That's about connecting with right now, this moment, and being grateful and taking in the amazingness of this present moment. And I thought that that was a really important lesson. So you're right, Randy, in that moment when you're suffering, then all of a sudden perspectives change and you kind of remember. But it's also very helpful during those other rushed moments. And it's easier for me to say it than to do it myself, but to kind of be in that present moment and connect with gratitude for what we have. Anybody else? Was there a line or some concept or something that resonated with you in the animation?
For me, it was like I find it like interesting when you have like an older person and a younger person together, and like growing up, the older person's like meant, giving you words of advice and wisdom, and then it comes to a point in your life where it starts to shift, and it's like interesting when the younger person is giving those like words of wisdom and guidance to the older person, and it just like the dynamics change. And it was just like that it's just interesting, I find, when it starts to shift and you're taking care of the older person now and telling them how it should be.
I think you're absolutely right. Do you have any experiences with that, or is that something you'd be willing to share?
I feel like I'm just on the brink of like telling my parents what to do, and for so many years it was like me calling them for advice. It's like now it's like I feel like with my mother, I'm like telling her what to do. So it's just interesting.
In those moments, do you ever experience gratitude?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it's like I feel like all the years of her parenting me, it's like paying back. Then it's full circle. So it's me helping her now, and paying it all back for all the years she guided me.
I'm getting chills. And you remember, how fortunate you are to have had your mom giving you that advice over all that time. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Somebody else wrote in the chat, it wasn't a specific line, but the concept of how our perception dictates how we feel. If we change how we see something, our feelings alter. And this is really profound. If we change how we see something, our feelings alter. This is great. You should make an animation, Nancy. This is great. If we change how we see something, our feelings alter. It's a great conversation starter in terms of what challenges we perceive we have and how it holds us back, how we can look at it differently to get us unstuck. Film is a great conversation starter. So I guess and thank you for that. Nancy, do you want to add anything to that? You want to turn your mic on and elaborate on that a little bit? Or maybe you can share an example of a time where either your perspective changed or where you helped someone else change their perspective on something and all of a sudden it looked really different. No mic. Okay, got it. No mic. Yep. So, I just completed an animation on tzedakah, and it's so interesting how all the different midot, all these different, traits, they all connect with one another. And I've got to say, especially when I'm out with my boys walking, on the street, and if we're having just a particularly good day, and it doesn't mean that anything great happened, it's just the weather is good and we're enjoying the city and we're walking. And sometimes I'll pass by someone who is asking for change or something. And one of the things that happens when I'm giving them change is I'm so acutely aware of how fortunate I am to be walking with my two boys. And I'm realizing how much tzedakah and gratitude are actually very, very, very much connected. Stopping in that moment and recognizing, how fortunate we are, and connecting that then also with some kind of action. And Judaism is very, very much about action, much more so than even kavanah or intention. Naseh v'nishma, we're going to take action. The first most important thing are our actions. And choosing this choice to take action, to focus in on this present moment and how grateful we are for what we have. It is a choice. That thing that you're mentioning, Nancy, about changing perspective, it is a choice. That is an action to say, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to focus in on what I can be grateful for. So I'm going to shift now a little bit because I gave you a little bit of a taste of how these animations can be used in a JCC. Do you have to be a deep, deep religious text scholar in order for these animations to be a conversation starter? No, right? You can approach it on any level, right? Meaning they use my animations on Kikar HaShabbat, and that's a Haredi website. On Aish has 6 or 7 of my animations on their website. It's an Orthodox website, right? But there's enough wisdom in there that if you want to go really deep, you can go very deep. And especially with the newer animations, they have 15-page study guides with tons and tons and tons of texts from Talmud and Tanakh and all sorts of other sources with questions. But if you just want to watch it as entertainment that also has some profound wisdom that connects to our heritage, it can be used in that way. And I guess what I'd like to do is open up the floor. I know that some people are Jewish educators, some people aren't and just, are connected to their Jewish heritage or run a JCC. But how could you use these animations? How could you see these animations? Because they're all free. Can you see how you might be able to be using them as a resource in your communities? Anybody? Yes, I see Jessie, is it?
I've actually used the gratitude animation a few times with adults teaching a mindfulness class, and then again over the summer with teens. Actually, the adults laughed, but the teens really engaged in it, which I thought was really cool.
Wow.
And we're moving forward and planning we do Mindful Mondays. And I'm looking to bring some of this into our Mindful Monday groups as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Have you watched any of the other animations?
I believe I watched the forgiveness one as well.
Forgiveness is the most popular one.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were driving in the car. And, you know, there are other ones like humility, the one on envy, the one repair, which is actually about tshuva. So all of them are actually great conversation starters. And they all connect with, you know, especially in the high holy days, the repair and forgiveness one are really relevant, but the humility one is relevant all the time. And soon I'm coming, there's one on conflict resolution that gives a whole, that I just released. So please share them with people. It's interesting that you said that the teens almost responded to it in a more serious way than the adults. That's interesting. I find that really interesting. That's the first that I've heard that, and that it makes sense, I guess, especially with this one, because they have more experience with mindfulness. Anybody else? Can you see how you might be able to use these animations in your community?
Hanan, I will say that one of the things Isabel and I have been discussing is often we are asked by JCC professionals who are programming Jewish film in their communities, whether or not there's a shorts festival or any specific short that they could use in conjunction with a longer film, or sometimes just clustered together. And one of the ways that I anticipate some of our JCC communities might use your resource is to identify thematically something that deserves a deeper dive and allow your animations to provide accessibility to that kind of conversation. If it's not a typical talk back with the director and the writer, you know, that's not the only way for film to help our communities engage. So that's something I'm going to offer up as an idea. And also we've been having conversations in various communities about ways to do that as Jewish educators, as arts and culture programmers across the board.
I think that that's wonderful. I think that's absolutely terrific. And it makes sense that you would thematically pair them in that way. And I see that Nancy wrote, I'd love to use this as a discussion group convening weekly. So I'll tell you, Nancy, I found out just because it popped up in like a Google search, but I found out that there was a congregation that was actually running a weekly series on Jewish ethics, and they were using my animations as the weekly study session. So they used the study guide for conversation starters, and everybody watched the animation in advance, and then they watched it together. There's also a couple of Musar groups across the country that use my animations regularly. So they really are meant to be used as widely as possible. And one thing that is always helpful is if you send me feedback. So if you go on the website and you go to kind of contact us, that goes directly to me. I remember I sent the Covenant Foundation after the first year or two, some 600 comments of people that were, responding to the animations. Some people, it helped them through like personal life crises that were really intense. And some people were saying how they were using them in their schools or whatever. But please send us feedback so that the Covenant Foundation and the people who fund these know that they're being used, that they're being enjoyed. And yes, so the other thing that I wanted to say in terms of accessibility, and I guess this is really, this is kind of really a personal aspect to this that is very important to me. Since doing the animations, I've become a little bit more observant. But one of the things that I noticed is that, there's kind of this one kind of behavior that happens in a synagogue, in a setting where people are like, okay, now I'm going to be spiritual, and now I'm going to focus on being the best human being that I can be. But a lot of times, as soon as you leave the synagogue, all of a sudden, all bets are off, right? If you're stressed, you might kind of run a person over, or I found myself the other day, screaming at a customer representative on the phone and then feeling really bad about it afterwards. And what I realized is that a lot of these Jewish values and a lot of these teachings, where it really comes into play is how we live our day-to-day lives. And one of the things that I do when I study with these, rabbis and Jewish text scholars is I ask myself, what pieces of this wisdom can really help me live a more meaningful, more fulfilling life in which I'm treating myself better, treating the people around me better, and helping to make the world a better place. And there really is so much wisdom out there. So when we're talking about accessibility, I really am asking myself, how can this wisdom be used in a very pragmatic way to make our lives better? And if that's the least that comes out of these animations, then I've done my job. So that's something really that's personally very important to me. And I hope you got that sense in that story. Does anybody have any questions about that, about the animation itself, that story? If it's autobiographical, or any of the concepts in there, or how the animations are being used or could be used? Does anybody have any questions, or my process? Really, I'm kind of opening it up for anything.
Well, if there aren't any questions, or we can take some that come up in the conversation, I'd love to draw a connection to this amazing series of animations and JFest. So JFest intentionally anchors itself in seasonal themes in the Jewish calendar and is committed to multi-generational family and community engagement. So we saw that these short films provide an incredible tool for us to go deeper with the themes that will be featured in our continental programs on Virtual J. And like you've all pointed out, these are amazing conversation starters, ways for you to have the local community engagement, to have even deeper, better, get to know you, get to know the tradition conversations in dialogue with these programs that we will be sharing as a continental community. And we've already come up with so many ways in which we might use Hanan's videos, and seeing what might pair with various programs, which will be throughout the fall and winter, very intentionally around the Jewish holidays. So I'll just extend once again, a note of gratitude for this work. And I think that we can really be imaginative. The programs that are on Virtual J, they're packaged up and ready to use. And we actually have some marketing materials for you at the end of this call.
Yeah.
But we also want to open it up to JCC professionals to get creative, how you engage with your communities around these events, and the resources that we will share with you, like Hanan's work, are really going to allow you to go deep, take ownership, and get creative with your communities.
I think I'm going to say, first of all, thank you, Isabel. And one of the things that has brought us great joy, working closely with the Covenant Foundation and the various artist educators that they helped us identify and that we've met through our uncommon connections as being part of the Covenant family, is this idea that we could take our time as we program on Virtual J with our amazing partners in Toronto to provide access to excellence for all of our JCCs and their extended communities. We're sort of modeling this moment by saying which artist educators, which resources are available to us that we can bring to you, like today with the sort of with gratitude that we're able to share Hanan and his animations with you. We're making this pairing not because it's the only pairing, but because it's one of so many rich opportunities that are available. So what I'm going to say is all of the resources that are related to our JFest programs will be available in the Dropbox, as Isabel said, and we're available to you to have brainstorms and make uncommon connections. And as Jesse so eloquently shared, some of you are ahead of us, right? These creative programs that you're building on your own, which are remarkable and engaging your community during a pretty challenging time. We're going to try to model that, and with your help, share that broadly with the greater JCC communities. So it's really about stronger together, and it's about having the ability to lean on each other and lean on the good work that each of you are doing, and in conjunction with some amazing creative artists. So I wanted to just mention that. And Isabel, I know that you're going to, thanks Nancy, we're happy you were here with us. I miss you. and to be continued. We're going to share, as part of JFest, the marketing department has created resources for our JCCs. Hanan will continue to share your resource and the value, I think, of this particular conversation with you. And by the way, I've seen that animation, I'm sure a dozen times, and I laugh each time and get verklempt each time that I see it. I identify something different each time. I hear something different each time. And I think it's important to realize, as Jesse mentioned, that different demographics will mine the animation for different messages, and that they're rich in so many different ways. And that's just important as well. I wrote down, first of all, I have no idea what you said, which just cracked me up, Hanan, when we were originally looking at the animation, because I just thought, I recall saying that to my father and my mother, and now I hear it on a daily basis from my son. So in the land of gratitude, I'm grateful I'm a person who can have gone full circle in that sharing. Isabel, should we share our upcoming events, or Hanan, is there more that you would like us to think about?
Well, there was one question from Larry Katz. How do you come up with your ideas? I guess, can you clarify, do you mean the subjects for the animations, or do you mean the stories behind them?
The stories.
Oh, the stories, right. So what ends up happening for me is the first thing is I choose the topic, like forgiveness or whatever it is, and then I start really studying with the rabbis about what kind of wisdom is in there. So for example, I'll just give you an example. The forgiveness one, right? You're commanded to forgive. If somebody apologizes 3 times and you don't forgive, then the onus is on you, right? So you're commanded to forgive. My question to the rabbis was, so why forgive? What if you don't believe in that? Like, why forgive? Why forgive? And I kept pushing them on it. And then all of a sudden came this wisdom from Rabbi Abraham Twersky, where it's like, fine, don't forgive. Don't forgive. I hope they're paying you the rent. And I'm like, what rent? What are you talking about? Well, how long have you been thinking about this? For 2 years? And you're still thinking about this? So how long are they going to live rent-free inside of your head? And actually, Rabbi Abraham Twersky got that wisdom from an AA meeting from a guy named John, who wasn't even Jewish, but it connects very much to Jewish wisdom, and you can track it back to Jewish text sources, but it's just kind of a very creative way to then kind of illustrate that point that there's a cost to not forgiving. Then I try to craft a story around that. So in that particular story for that animation, I just invented a story. I invented a story about somebody who really screwed me over, and now after 2 years wants to come and apologize and wants to make everything good. And I'm still really pissed off and I don't want to forgive the person. And I came up with a believable enough scenario that it led to a really good, healthy debate. So first I pick a topic that I think there might be enough on. I start studying. And once I start getting the wisdom and some of the things that I think are really profound points, I build a story around that. It usually involves some kind of conflict, sometimes invented, sometimes half based on reality. The one that you saw in Gratitude is the one that's really autobiographical, but most of them are just invented. But they're invented based on kind of real life scenarios or scenarios that could take place. Does that answer your question? Good enough? So, but it's hard. It's hard. It's months and months and months of studying, and then coming up with the story is really crazy, and then I have to do it in an organic way. So that's my process. And I just want to say, Randy, what you're doing in terms of creating this kind of hub of content where people can come as a resource is just amazing. It's just amazing. I think it's such a great idea, and it's such a privilege to be part of that resource. So I hope everybody has my website, hananharchol.com. But again, you can find it all on YouTube. And the only thing that I ask is please send me a note of how it's being used and how it's being received, because I like passing that on to the Covenant Foundation. So yeah, thank you again.
It's our great pleasure. And I'll say again that to address the story piece of it, part of what is special about JFest is the thematic focus on storytelling, ownership of story, to help build family, build community, and define resilience and build resilience. And so there's something incredibly special about these particular animations because they invite different kinds of conversations from different members of a family or of a community, and stories will be shared. I mean, we witnessed that just organically here today, where you said, and that, how easy was that? Hanan just said, we're going to watch this and write down anything that is particularly resonant. And I thought that's genius, because what happens when we run programs is we show something and then there's dead silence at the end of it. Here, we're actually telling people, this isn't a passive scenario. You are a member of the story initiative that we've just invited you to be part of. And just by listening, you're going to make a connection that will be sort of fuel for the conversation that Nancy mentioned before, the great sort of conversation starter. It starts with you, how you own the story. What is your response to the story that you're listening to? So I think that's really super meaningful. And as it relates to JFest in particular, Isabel's, I know, put a bunch of things into the chat, and we will share these with you widely. You know, we have an ongoing ask for all of our JCCs as they engage with our JFest events on Virtual J, which is, there is usually a component where we ask you to think about what is your story and share it back with us. So as the time continues and as you continue to engage with your communities on Virtual J with our program, the first two in October, October 21st, is something called Sustain, a Root to STEM Jewish cooking experience, which is a live cooking experience with Chef Michael Solomonov, who's an extraordinary chef personality, and really in his own way, a Jewish narrator and educator, telling stories of Jewish history through food. And we all have those moments where you have a smell at a holiday and it reminds you of a relative, or it reminds you of something that you wish you could never smell again. There are all kinds of stories. They're not all beautiful you know, they're not all rhapsodies of our family past, but they're provocative in ways that invite us to share back. And so part of what Chef Michael will do on October 21st as he's cooking is invite you to think about those stories, and we will then invite you to share back those stories. Equally, on October 24th, we have another beautiful partnership event for JFest with Reboot and the Jewish Book Council, where we talk about what are the objects that define us. There's an examination of artifact as it relates through a book, beautiful book by Laura Liebman, that our partners at the Jewish Book Council is sharing with us, our author, and Reboot, which really is about the immigration experience and what would you take with you if you had to leave. This notion that we carry things with us that are meaningful to us, and sometimes we carry things with us that we just can't let go of. And maybe there's a moment where we need to let go, which is a little bit what we talked about during our animation earlier today.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So just a final thing that I wanted to share with everybody is that I just gave you a little glimpse of how we do the conversation when I run a limud or something like that. But if you want me to come to your community, I'm happy to do so virtually like this. It's very easy for me. You don't have to have a budget. Don't feel like you know, you're insulting me. I'm happy to share it, where we basically do an hour where your community comes and we play an animation and we have a discussion. I've done it for organizations like Dorot, which have like more elderly people, and I've done it for younger organizations and a whole mix. And I'm telling you, it leads to very, very intense conversations because people get very personal, and it's really beautiful, and it connects everybody around this theme. It's a really wonderful experience. So I'm happy to do that. That's one thing. And the second thing is that on my website, hananharchol.com, there's also a link to my first feature film, which has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's an autobiographical film about my experience as a public high school teacher in New York City, which is what I do. And it's about my first 3 years and how I almost quit. And now I've been teaching for 12 years and I just won a teaching award from New York City. It's about how 50% of New York City teachers leave, and it kind of shows why. And it's a very good film. And why am I mentioning it in this context is because a lot of what kept me staying as a teacher was all the wisdom that I was learning studying my Jewish ethics. A lot about humility, judging others favorably, gratitude, forgiveness, that comes into the teaching practice every day. So you'll see if you watch the movie that in many ways, it has a lot to do with the Jewish wisdom that is expressed in the animations. So I hope you check out my website, hananharchol.com. And it was such a privilege and a pleasure to be sharing this time with you. So I hope we reconnect in the future somehow.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for joining. Thanks, Sue Gelsey, our Chief Program Officer, for sneaking in. We're so happy you're here. I'm happy to see you. And we're going to continue to share resources with everyone, Hanan. And I'm so grateful for your artistry, for your head, for your heart, and also your generosity, making connections with us.
And thank you,
Incredibly
the Covenant
meaningful.
Foundation, again, for funding
Absolutely.
the animations, and also for putting the two of us in touch with each other. What a
Absolutely.
wonderful organization. So
Agree
Chag
with you.
Sameach, everybody. Chag
Chag
Sameach.
Sameach to all. Be well, everyone, and to be continued. Thanks, everybody.